My name is Daniel. I'm going to be talking to you about the gospel of Jesus Christ. And what I want to do is demonstrate to you with these cards here what that means and how that works, and to give you a different idea of how God has sent Christ to interact with us and what our responsibility is from that. So what we have here is some cards that look like pawns of a chess set, and we're using that as a demonstration to show, of course, an interaction, or an interaction like a game. So basically, when God sent his son, he sent his son to us. So that was kind of the first move. And now it's our move. It's our move to accept him or not. But one thing about a game such as this, is if a person moves or God moves, then it's our turn. But can I move a second time or even a third? No, because there's rules. And I'm going to show you a little bit about what that is. So, in the beginning, there was God. And he created the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And this was the Garden of Eve, and it was a perfect place. And so he added man to that, Adam. And Adam walked with God in this, I'll turn him around, in this garden together. But God had a rule. He says you can eat of any tree of the garden except for the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And we know what happened. Man disobeyed God. They, Adam and Eve, ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and sin entered man. And so that man wouldn't stay in this state for eternity, which would happen if he would have went ahead and in this state ate from the tree of life. He put man out of the garden. He separated man from the garden. And so man was out here now in the world. And so, of course, what man does, they populate and created more of their likeness. But it wasn't not even one generation before they started killing each other. And so what happens is, with man in this state, is they compare themselves with each other. And so they might say, well, I'm better than this guy here because I don't kill. Or they compare themselves with this person over here and says, I don't steal. Or they compare themselves to this person over here and says, I'm better than this person for whatever reason. And the problem is they're comparing themselves to other people as opposed to comparing themselves to the goodness of God. And it's just to tell you a little bit about sin. Sin is like this. If I lie to my daughter or my son, the consequences of that sin are going to be, they might be disappointed with me or not trust me about certain things. If I lie to my wife, it could lead to potentially divorce, depending on what it is. If I lie to a judge in a courtroom, it could be considered perjury and potentially could go to jail or prison, depending on what I lied about. If I lied to God, the punishment is going to be much higher. It could potentially lead to hell and the lake of fire. So the bigger the authority that you transgress against or sin against, the greater the consequences. But God did not want to keep us in this state. He loved us. And so what he did is he sent his son, Jesus. And Jesus was put down on this earth, and he walked among men. And when he came about 30 years old, he came to John the Baptist, who was out preaching in the wilderness, to be baptized. And so he gets baptized in water. He goes down under the water and he comes back up. And the Holy Spirit comes upon him like a dove. And with this Holy Spirit, he goes around teaching how men should be. And the comparison that they have is Christ. And so men aren't comparing themselves to each other, or his disciples and apostles are not comparing themselves to each other, but they're comparing themselves to him. And they start seeing a change. And so he's going around making disciples, going around with them. And then he says, hey, I can't. After about 3.5 years, he tells them he's going to be crucified. We know all that. So here he is crucified. He goes down for 3 days. He's raised from the dead. And now he's risen as king. And he walks around with his disciples and appears to many people. And he says, I have to go to my Father in heaven so I can send back the Comforter who's going to teach you and instruct you my ways. So he ascends up into heaven. And he sends down his Holy Spirit. And people believe on him. And so you see people starting to believe his word. And so they actually start becoming Christians. And you see them becoming Christians. And they believe on his word. They believe him. And so they themselves also, for the word says you must be baptized in water and by spirit. which is the Holy Spirit, which he's sending back. So they're getting baptized as well. And they dying with Christ, and they're rising with Christ. And they too are now filled with the Holy Spirit. And like Christ, should be walking around making other believers, other disciples, like themselves, teaching them, baptizing others in water, who also are rising with Christ out of the water, which is the symbolization of his death, and being baptized in the Holy Spirit. So you have these people going around filled with the Holy Spirit, doing exactly what Christ did, same as he did, making believers, discipling them, baptizing them in water. But we know that he's coming back. And he's coming back as king. And the word says that he's going to separate the sheep from the goats. And with the goats, he's going to gather them up and separate them and cast them into the lake of fire. And those who are with him and filled with the Holy Spirit, the sheep, are going to go and be with him in heaven and rule and reign in heaven in paradise. So one has to ask, which one of these are you? Are you the one with the heart of stone, living in sin? Are you kind of a cultural Christian? That's what I call it. I identify as a Christian, but I don't go to church, but I'm a cultural Christian. Are you a saved, probably go to church, but the word says you must be baptized in water and by Spirit. So are you filled with his Holy Spirit, and are you going around making other disciples? Which one of these are you? So as you think about that, it goes back to our little game here, where we have to make a move or a choice about what God has done. I mean, people make comments, and I used to make comments as well. It's like, how can God let these things happen? How can this happen in the world if this, and this has happened? Well, actually, he has nothing to do with it. He's made his move. So if we sin, right, and he sends his son for that sin, to die on the cross and ascend to heaven, that's his move. And it's our move then to accept his son, accept what he said. And then of course then it's his move to forgive us and accept us for our sin. And then it's our move to, I would say, be baptized with the Holy Spirit, asking for the Holy Spirit. And he sends his Holy Spirit, and that's his move. And then, of course, from that, we learn about Christ, because the word says, he who loves me will obey me. And so obeying me means obeying his word. And of course, studying his word and etc., moving forward, making disciples. And what his word says on that is, one of the last things he said when he rose is, I want you to go make disciples of all nations, lay hands on the sick, casting out demons, and raising the dead. And so I would challenge you, if you claim to be a Christian, or you're going to a church or not going to a church, but you say you're a Christian, are you doing those things? Are you going out and witnessing the gospel? Are you laying hands on the sick? Are you casting out demons? And are you raising the dead? Is God doing that through you? Of course, it's all his power. But is he doing that through you? And I would say, if you're not doing that, I would really question even if you're saved. I really would. And I used to be the same way. Cultural Christian, believed I was saved, but when I started really seeing the power of God move, I started really seeing people witnessing the gospel, laying hands on the sick, and people being healed, demons being cast out. And I'm looking forward to seeing the dead being raised. I hope this challenges you. I hope this makes you question and identify who you are and where you're at in this. And I hope it's something you learned and examine yourself as I examine myself. And thank you for watching.